Preparation is very important in our life. Similarly, preparation alone is not enough. We need to have burden for the souls. We need to have burden for God's work. We need to have a heart filled with burden for God. You can find many characters in the Bible who was filled with burden for God. Today we're going to study about the burden for souls or burden for the kingdom of God from the life of Isaiah. Let's turn to the book of Isaiah, 13 chapter, first verse. It says, the burden against Babylon which Isaiah the son of Amos had. The burden against Babylon which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. The burden against Babylon. So this man of God has a burden. You can find how important it is to have a burden for souls and how important it is to have burden for places and burden for people to get saved. You can read through the book of Isaiah. In many places you can find that he had burden for different places and different people. Let me take few of the verses for your meditational reference. Let's turn to the book of Isaiah 19 chapter, first verse. It says the burden against Egypt. Again we can find the burden that he had against Egypt. And we can turn to 17th chapter, first verse. It says the burden against Damascus. Book of Isaiah 21st chapter, first verse, the burden against the wilderness of the sea. And 22nd chapter, the burden against the valley of vision. You can find burden is repeated in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was a man who carried the burden of God in his heart. Today, what is important in ministry? It is good to grow in our knowledge. It is good to know many things. But at the same time, if we don't have a burden, we can never see a result. We need to have a burden in our heart for dying souls. We need to have a burden for the congregation of our church. We need to have a burden for people around us who are dying without knowing Jesus. We need to have a burden for our country. We need to have a burden for our continent. We need to have a burden for this nation. We need to have a burden for people to get saved in this world. Today, to the youngsters who are watching the series, who wants to shine for God, I would like to encourage you, have a burden for souls. Have a burden for people around you. Have a burden for the nations. Unless you have a burden, you can never be used by God. Today, let us change our heart. Let us spend time at God's feet. Let us ask God, Lord, give me that burden for souls. Give me that thirst for souls. Without a burden, we can never be a blessing to many.